The death investigation for Catherine Sarah Morris would like to break the 5-year chain of untruths and half-truths told by the Anne Arundel County Police Department.
Hello, I'm Dr. E. Williams, National President of the National Congress of Black Women. And I want to welcome the Caucus of African American Leaders of Anne Arundel County and guests. We are the National Congress of Black Women, and we're very concerned about the mistreatment of women. We're deeply saddened that the military and law enforcement agencies have given not enough assistance to Kathy's case. We're standing with Kathy's mom, my good friend, Mrs. Marguerite Morris, and we are supporting her. And we are doing all that we can to bring some form of justice for the tragic loss of her daughter. Thank you, and God bless.
Meet Catherine Morris, beautiful 22-year-old daughter of Pastors Joe and Marguerite Morris. A quick overview: her body was found at Arundel Mills, property owned by Anne Arundel County Community College. Motive: death, carbon monoxide toxicity. Ruled a suicide from postings and tweets. Suicide notes: only 2 witnesses are ever questioned. Both give false answers. There are a number of scene things that security guard alludes to, perhaps racial profiling, delayed calling 911, keys out of the ignition when he said they were in the ignition, and there's no record of spoiled evidence. Video footage from 3 nearby cameras have also been altered and or destroyed, but police don't care about this. The deceased was a victim of a military money scam and worth $100,000 dead. She had also threatened to expose those persons just hours before her death, and that's in the logs. My purpose today for those viewing is to disavow the police claims of 4 thorough investigations. We allege there have been cover-ups, and there have been because of the embattled police agency itself.
My name is Leslie Kim. I have been a fraud investigator and an instructor for over 3 decades. I have authored over 700 instructional articles. I've lectured on 4 continents. I am the executive director of FightFraudAmerica.com, and I am the executive editor of the John Cook Fraud Reports. In August of 2013, we opened case number M031090. At that point, when we opened that case, my gut instinct told me that it was grieving parent syndrome. That's what happens when a parent experiences a horrific event like the death of a child. Within weeks of beginning that investigation, that gut feeling was gone, and instead it was replaced with, this is a murder, this is a homicide, and this was staged to look like a suicide.
Investigation number 1 was on May 6th, and it lasted about 48 hours. It was under James Tier, who himself was facing challenges for perhaps misappropriate actions within his department. In charge are 2 detectives, Hollis. Valid security guards arrived somewhere disputed between 4:30 and 5:15 a.m. by their own records, by their own deposition. Police and medical examiners agree and again ruled it suicide within 48 hours. The police Googled the manner of death. Chief Gary Lyle himself, who they seem to rely on, allegedly after viewing hours of surveillance tapes, and he stated the following: that at approximately 21:39, as you can see, the rear lights on the vehicle come on. He even states the wrong date of doing this, and he says that at 5:32 a.m. he sees mall security stopping at the deceased vehicle. And he also states under oath that it does not affect the deceased vehicle, except there's a 911 call. The 911 call itself was logged at 5:30 a.m. So therefore, the security people had to arrive at least 15 minutes or so before they acknowledge arriving. The mother Googled the method of death, and around that time, May 6th, between May 6th and May 8th, and it actually came back Kanai Kajima, who had killed 3 persons and the descriptions of those persons is almost identical to what was done with Catherine Morris. So we do have to ask the question, was this a copycat killing? Is that a possibility? And yes, it is. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner also says, when they mentioned this, that there was no mention of this being a copycat killing or something they say, whatever it is. They wrote a long letter that makes absolutely no sense coming from a professional agency. And the officer of the Chief Medical Examiner himself signed that letter. And we have that in other documents, and you'll find it very. Chief Gary Lyles, again, a 27-year-old veteran of the Anne Arundel County Police Department with a background in special investigations, gave a one-page report. But interestingly enough, he references only the camera that was the farthest away from the deceased vehicle, even though we know it on good authority that there was another camera that was 60 feet away from Catherine's car. We ourselves and a private investigator stood on the spot where her car was, and immediately security came out to want to know what we were there. On another occasion, NAACP was on that spot, and again, just very shortly, security from the building came out and wanted to know what we were doing there. And they've never discussed any footage, anything about the detail from that camera that was so close to her car. Chief Gary Lau also says that no one exited or entered the vehicle, but the police report itself says, and no one's ever gone back to this point, someone said that the footage showed someone standing next to the vehicle and then the taillights are on between 2100 and 2200 hours, and a possibility of a vehicle pulling off up nearby or off camera. Again, there may be explanations, but they've not offered any, and that's a pretty big scenario. The timings are as such, just timings, and then even a possibility. The one thing they keep repeatedly trying to stunt everyone with is they're saying that the surveillance tape footage was missing because it is motion sensitive. This is also what they told the homicide panel. But if you see in this video, this is about 10:49 p.m. It's a Saturday night with overflow parking. The movies are going on until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and there's a man walking across the parking lot. There had to be footage because all three cameras would have been tricked, whatever that word is, would have been tripped by persons going back and forth. Yet no one speaks of that. No one ever checked also with the inside cameras for the movies. There was talk of her going to the movies and that she'd been there the night before trying to go to the movies. We don't know about that. But there's no one that ever searched those cameras to find out if this girl even ever exited or entered the mall. So we know from looking at the footage and the surveillance tape itself and taking some stills from it, that at 21:39, this vehicle is seen pulling away at the exact time, coincidence, that the brake lights come on. This vehicle is also seen, and we have a signed deposition or signed affidavit from a witness, was seen in a parking lot, or a vehicle similar to this is sitting in the driveway of one of the alleged persons of interest. The only one of two people the police questioned who would not allow her statement to be tape recorded, and also had a degree in forensics. This person also has said, her and her husband, allegedly, that the one person of interest came to their home on May the 5th and said that Catherine was dead on May the 5th, left her children and left their home. They have never alibied this witness. I called the college because I thought I was requesting aerial pictures, because they had some pictures of the car from atop the building, or aerial pictures. And instead what I was sent without any warning were pictures of my daughter's body in the car. These pictures were taken by the security guard himself, who in all their records say that there were no pictures. but he acknowledges under oath that he took these pictures. He acknowledges being all over the car, opening both doors, searching the trunk of the car. All this was done according to his own testimony before he called 911. He also states that the keys, he did not take the keys out of the ignition. The keys are laying by my daughter's feet. This was taken prior to police arriving. Investigation number 2. Again, Tier is in charge. This time a detective, Vince Carbonaro, is in. We believe, and we have evidence to show clearly, that Carbonaro pulled facts, but he only reported partial or selective facts. Anything that might have brought question as to what happened in that parking lot, he omitted from every written report that he does. Not only is it Carbonaro, but there's a detective pool. And every time there is a discrepancy, and I look down at the released internal communications, Detective Poole's name is on that piece of paper. So here we have Carbonaro, who only reports to everyone that there were 2 calls that the deceased made. Somehow, now if he subpoenaed these records, as it says he does, those would also show that there were 3 hours over which 2 individuals spent 3 hours from military installation trying to get a hold of Catherine Morris. One of these individuals is a person who made that statement to the police and who in their driveway was a car similar to that seen leaving the scene. If he subpoenaed the records, he would have seen that prior to her returning a call, there were 3 attempts to call her by those individuals who really wanted to talk to her that day. He would have also seen an exchange of emails, and they alleged that the phone calls and all, that 5-minute phone call on May the 2nd was a friendly one. But if you look at the communications, the person, first of all, they're using aliases. It is someone named Latoya King, who allegedly has borrowed someone's phone, not telling them the purpose she wants their phone for, and she's using fake ID or fake names and all to contact the deceased. And she calls the deceased an email gangster, and the punctuation you use says that there's a problem with that, and whatever's going on, it is not friendly. In 2015, and it took them over a year to release the internal communications. But it's very interesting. You see Sergeant Poole's name at the bottom. He says, as a side note, he mentions the information that was requested. And in my documents, you're going to see where I have the first. So let me back up to the Walmart issue. I have the receipts from what was purchased at Walmart when Catherine visited there. And there are no grills and there are no sleeping pills. There absolutely are not on that list. Catherine also purchased a full tank of gas the morning that she allegedly was deciding to take her life. But as a side note here, and I have those things, I'll provide them to anyone that wants to see them. As a side note, Detective Carbonaro, it says that he's an extremely thorough and capable investigator, but someone gave him direct orders, as this internal communication cites, to not deviate. We'd love to know what that is. So we have a James Davis, private investigator. You can see his 40-year experience as a former police officer of the Washington, D.C. Metro Department, United States Department of Justice. He says it's apparent to him that this has been a cover-up by the. Then there's investigation number 3 under Chief Kevin Davis, and we can focus just on that one on the homicide panel, which they again used to discredit me by saying professionals have looked into this case. But those professionals asked 3 questions. And 3 questions were the particulars about the surveillance video. They were told it's missing footage because it was motion sensitive. Attempting to establish that Catherine purchased the disposable grills. They pulled a credit card that had whatever transaction. They said it had no transactions on it from a certain period of time up until her death. And I have the records, and that's absolutely false. Because again, they never asked the family which credit card, And on the card that she used every day for purchases, we see that she bought a cookie that morning for 50 cents at McDonald's. So she did spend money doing things. But they couldn't even be counted on. But I wonder this. If you got the information on her credit card and you subpoenaed that credit card, you would have had to have known and seen that there were other credit cards that existed. In order for you to get the one, you had to see the record of other, and they did not, to my understanding, did not mention or shown anything about the transactions on the real credit card, and that's what we have. Again, the examination of the pills and the grow packaging and the lighter showed no fingerprints. Not in no viable. It showed no fingerprints. And I don't know how a pill bottle handled by a person cannot show fingerprints. I don't know why a car keys and a lighter, whatever they are, there should have been somebody's fingerprints somewhere. Because the other witness that they questioned, she allegedly was in the car with Catherine the morning of May the 5th. But there's no record of those things. So again, this is information that we've gotten, and I've already stated all of this. The surveillance tape, the credit card, and the dementia. So we go to the chief medical examiner's office, who sent an extensive letter and said that they did an independent investigation, and most of the contact to the office of chief medical examiner's office is by Detective Poole. And I believe that Poole was manipulating the results, manipulating the data on all of this. There's a 5-page letter from the medical examiner's office. It is totally an embarrassment that they would send a letter that is so opinionated without fact. But this is what they did, and that in itself ought to be a travesty or tragedy. They also report to the family in that letter incorrect DNA results. And the police had previewed this letter twice. They'd seen it. So these parties know that the letter coming out of the chief medical examiner's office is incorrect and false. But the police let it roll. And I'm thinking that Poole was one of the people that was instrumental in this. So here we have it. They say DNA was found on one of the girl's outer packaging and on the lighter. And then you can see from the DNA conclusions, all of these little strips are their findings, not Moore's retyping. I have cut them from their reports. And it says here that an insufficient amount of recoverable DNA regarding the disposable charcoal packaging, no one's prints are on it. I'm not understanding that myself. And it says on the lighter that there were 2 persons' DNA on that lighter. A key person of interest, again, borrowing somebody's phone, allegedly telling people the victim was deceased before her body was found. And we subpoenaed records. I subpoenaed records of her. She was given a no-contact order on the 7th of May for the husband, and or having to do anything to do with him. And phone records show that within the first 30 days, she and he had contact via text or mail or phone calls or whatever over 60 times in the first 30 days following Catherine Moore's. Again, Chief Kevin Davis, and this is Melissa Beardsmore. Again, it seems like they're more concerned about things that can harm them. They're afraid of their exposure for what can harm them, getting at what's truth. Then we go to the alleged investigation number 4 under Altamore, who publicly claims that they've been down this road 4 times before, to quote him, and question my credibility. We have another professional going on the record, Jerry Widener, been in the business for 45 years, and he also problems with the police investigation. Maryland Public Information shows that they knew that there was a problem with the DNA, because on April 27th they're saying go ahead and test it, and we know it's going to raise questions with the family, but we're going to have more of a problem if we don't test it. So they already knew something was wrong out there. Again, it talks about prints on the packaging. There's no prints. It says let's just report the facts, but they allow false facts to be reported. And another thing, we're talking about the DNA again, internal communications versus the forensics report. They talk about no other DNA, and that's false, because on the front passenger seat, there were two persons' DNA. Passenger door, but there's no mention and there's no testing to find out or to figure out, well, whose DNA that is. We've gone to people around the country that are ringing in. Sometimes we try people in Maryland and they find out what police department it is and they don't want to get involved because of conflicts of interest. So we've had to go outside of Maryland, and I declare today that I don't care, across this country, there are people that are qualified and there are experts that have lent to this investigation, and they should not be disqualified because they're not licensed in Maryland, when even Maryland itself would have to send things out of the county or out of the state to be properly worked and identified. The other thing that I want to say is that the GPS settings have still not been explained. They allegedly show that phone moving after a certain time. Between 9 and 11 or 12 o'clock, the phone is pinging off of towers outside of that area. And there's been no explanation as to what's causing that. There was confusion over the UTC times. We clarified that. But it doesn't change the tower locations. It doesn't change the fact that on a report the police gave me, well, they've still not given me the actual records. They've only given me a PDF file, okay, versus what the company pulled. The only discrepancy that we can find in records of one fact versus another fact is that particular time period that's conveniently gone from one. Anything the Anne Arundel County Police Department does. They've been plagued with accountability challenges over the last 5 years, with 2 police chiefs resigning in the question. What more can you do? Let's insist on answers and accountability at all levels. Ask, why didn't they do a thorough investigation? They know there's a problem. And I believe my part in this as a person that's been in it so much is I believe that perhaps someone on TIER's staff, when TIER was leaving out, gave an order. And they've been trying to backtrack and keep that thing covered up for the last 5 years. I don't know. It just keeps getting deep. The explanations, it seems like there's nothing that is as it appears. You know, there's so many dark places in this because no agency has stepped in and said to the Anne Arundel County Police, what happened? So as we bring this to a close, what more can you do? Does it have to do with race? Things across our nations kind of support that. Insist that every agency explain their internal communications. Get behind me and demand answers. You know, we want these people considered for possible obstruction of justice if they kept justice from happening, because I would still believe it was murder. I don't care what they say. When you get down to this thing as a detective, and you even get down into the suicide notes that don't sound like the same person wrote them, when you get down to the tweets that conveniently came out when it could have been somebody else that had the phone, because the last tweet that comes out waiting for this to be over could have come from someone that had her phone in hand. But you'd have to look at the forensic extractions to understand why we can come to that conclusion that did not have to be Catherine. Yes, someone spoke to her at about 8:30 something, but the car doesn't appear beside her until almost an hour later. And that's where you see, or whatever that time is, that's where you see the questionable about someone possibly being by the car, whether or not she ever exited or entered the car, and how these communications could have been falsified. There is a thing where the roommate, who was also the other person that they questioned, Michelle Harper, who says that she saw a letter in Catherine's things, almost as if mommy and daddy had removed it. But I can say today, there never was a letter that Michelle Harper references belonging to, that Catherine wrote to Isaac Goodwin. There has never been any evidence. There was never anything handwritten, and there's never been any evidence in any electronic extractions we've done, because there's no reason for me to do those extractions and others and we still not be able to find this alleged letter. This person was also, if you're listening to my voice, the only person who allegedly saw or heard Kathy alive. and no one's ever questioned anything. This person also told the police, and again, the police are selective about what they report because we've done the extractions, but they also tell the police that something that happened 3 days, two or 3 days before this girl dies, happened 10 to 14 days prior. And I'm not understanding how you can mix that up. 3 days versus 10 to 14 days prior. So yeah, so in the end, we'd like the manner of death changed to undetermined. Thank you for your time. Again, this is all about, for Kathy's sake, we're advocating for change. In print 2 or 3 weeks before she died, and it's actually there by King. And I think there's a message from that we need to get some answers. And a lot of this has had to do with race. I don't care what anyone says. I remember clearly as I close this out, and thank you for your patience, been 25 minutes of your time. But even the state's attorney citing to me when I would look to question other women, he brought up their backgrounds as if there could possibly be involved. He looked at me and he looked at Michelle's what she had studied in, and the fact that she was traveling outside the country, and then another witness in their background, clearly rationalizing because of their demeanor and their accomplishments that they couldn't have done anything to harm this girl. And I think that itself is kind of racial profiling that happens, unfortunately, in this situation. Thank you and have a great day.